So my name's Eli. I am here representing Arbitrum as a community manager, and we have a great group of speakers today to start the new year. We're basically going to be covering a lot of DeFi and integration and composability and some topics around liquidity and Arbitrum and all that good stuff. So without further ado, why don't you guys one by one just give a little intro to who you are, what protocol you're with, and what you do at that protocol.
I can start if you'd like. So yeah, I'm Jib. I'm the lead protocol engineer at Rysk Finance. Rysk is an options protocol on Arbitrum that is launching the first and only hybrid options AMM and OTC protocol. And this is sort of risk managed and hedged to generate uncorrelated returns for its LPs. And we actually currently hedge with options and then perps with the great guys from RageTrade and GMX, as well as spot via Uniswap. Then sort of in Rysk as a whole focused on providing diverse payoffs. And then we're also working on a secret product which we think will unlock sophisticated participation in the on-chain options trading game. But we won't talk about that just yet. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I'll jump in then. Hi, I'm Josh. I work with Jib at Rysk Finance. So I am a core smart contract engineer. I've been with Rysk since pretty much the start. And yeah, over the last few weeks, I've actually been building our integration with GMX to allow us to hedge using GMX perps to go alongside with our existing RageTrade integration.
I guess I'll go next. So my name is Viper. I'm head of BD at RageTrade. I handle things such as partnerships, a little bit of marketing, kind of a little bit of everything. But my main focus is on our white glove service, which we introduced to essentially give a premium service to those who LP commit into our product. And so we're really excited to work with everybody. And we're excited to do our next cap increase later this month post second audit.
And last but not least, CoinFlip.
Hi, CoinFlip Canada here on behalf of GMX. I handle partnerships and ecosystem within the GMX ecosystem. So basically, work with other protocols like Rysk, like Rage, and just see how we can all work together, sort of in this open environment that we've created over on Arbitrum.
All right, great. Nice to meet you all. And yeah, it's going to be good. So why don't you guys kind of give your take on why collaboration and composability matter in DeFi, and maybe explain composability to the audience a bit in layman's terms.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So it all comes down to the money Lego thesis in DeFi, doesn't it? So it isn't feasible for a single team to have the resources or the knowledge to build every single moving part of a complex system. And I don't think that should be something that users should want either. So by having interfaces for other projects to hook into, you can have teams with expertise in their respective fields be responsible for their part of the stack. And that allows for creative use cases that perhaps the original devs might not have even thought about or have the capacity to build. So, for instance, go back to Rysk, we integrate both RageTrade and GMX to hedge our book. And thankfully, we have some Galaxy Brain quants crunching numbers all day to help us get a better idea of what we need to hedge and when. And it wouldn't be feasible for us to build our own perp protocol in the same way. It would be silly for Rage or GMX to spend as much time as we have looking at options when their time's better spent making their own protocol as the best they can be. So it's quite a new and interesting phenomenon that I think comes about specifically because of the composable nature of smart contracts. And we as devs would be stupid not to capitalize on that by collaborating.
Yeah,
All right,
I'll go
great.
off on that. Those are really good points. So, it also helps allow different DeFi projects to work together and build off of each other's successes. But also, it allows DeFi projects to easily integrate with each other to create more complex and sophisticated financial products. You know, by being able to build upon existing infrastructure, you can quickly build up a prototype and iterate on new ideas, which kind of incentivizes innovation, especially since you have infrastructure to build on.
Yeah, one of the things like we usually see in this space is when a lot of information is shared, it's a lot easier to push different protocols kind of together as opposed to in an isolated fashion. And that goes across any, genre of protocol, not just in DeFi.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, one is obviously the fact that the capital and products that can be built, but I think it's also just the number of people who have that opportunity to build over top. Because just using an example from GMX, there were a number of protocols, like someone on the call who we've been very active with, but we've also seen many protocols who we never heard of, never talked to, who were able to just go look at the contracts, see how they fit their purposes, and be able to go out and launch products. And I think the fact that it is permissionless, if you have an idea and you think it's viable, you can go and build it. There's nobody gated or restricting you from being able to do so, which very much was the case when it came to traditional financial markets.
So with that being said, it is like a big pro in the space to have integration and composability, but obviously anything that is that complex and can have that many different people working together is going to bring challenges. So what do those look like in your guys' experience?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So yeah, I've done a lot of integration related projects in my day, and I think one of the key things is just the technical complexity that can occur with integrations, and then also just access to help and advice on certain things. And so one of the key things is like most protocols don't really put much documentation into their code. So most do, but some don't. And then that sort of like, if you compound that with sort of lack of team availability on integrations, it actually makes it a lot more technically complex and difficult to integrate certain protocols, even if they have very good product offering. And then the other more obvious one is that it drastically increases smart contract risk. So if, for example, we are integrated with Rage or GMX, and God forbid they have some sort of exploit that could potentially affect us as well. So that's definitely one of the main issues with integrations. And so, if we use a few examples, like even with Rage and GMX, there have been certain teething issues with the integrations. Like GMX, we found like specific issues that appear on mainnet that don't appear in test environments. With RageTrade, there were like changes in the contracts after we did an integration. So there are these small teething issues that happen during actually writing these contracts. And things can get even worse. Like we've had some even worse things happen before that. So I could talk about a bit more, but if we have time. And so, I think integration, like at its core, is a very good thing. But the problem is you need to have like a very full understanding of the protocol you're integrating with. Otherwise, there can be sort of foot guns that you don't see, which could introduce risk or just make time to development even harder.
And
Sorry, go ahead, Viper.
to kind of build on top of that, besides the risk of security vulnerabilities, especially with complex smart contract code and stuff, but also you kind of introduce a risk of single point failure because you're built on top of for example, RageTrade is an ETH perp but also perp products, and our flagship product is these delta neutral GLP vaults, and so of course we are built on top of GMX, and so if God forbid something happened to the GMX ecosystem, then that takes down other products that are built on top of GMX. So although we're very optimistic, clearly, on the GMX ecosystem, but that's definitely one con. But I think, just to mention what you said before, definitely more pros and cons, but that is one con to think about.
Yeah, when you talk about just combining all these different protocols, um, security is usually going to be the most important thing, where so many funds are going to be flowing through it. And that's even the case outside of integration and composability. Just when you look at blockchains, just the way they need to scale, security is always can be a limiting factor because.
Yeah, another thing is we also find that, I don't know if this is specific to sort of smart contracts or Solidity teams in general, but they tend to be more resource constrained, and obviously that means if they're focusing on something else, they might not have time to commit to helping with integration and stuff like that. So there's obviously like dev time issues associated with these things too. So it's about, I don't know, like at what point sort of the resource issue stops being an issue, but it clearly is something that definitely happens for a lot of teams.
Yeah, when you have a lot of different teams working together too, I imagine the first thing you come across is time zones. If you're like, where does everybody live, and how are we going to make this work without killing our sleep cycles?
Yeah, exactly.
Great. So when we talk about integrations, you can't do that without talking about the ecosystem at large. Case in point being Arbitrum. So, why are we doing this all on Arbitrum? Like, why is this all being built on Arbitrum? And yeah, who would like to speak on
I'm
that one?
assuming we'll get a better airdrop if we say some nice things. Just kidding. But and, of course, scalability is one of them. Allowing transactions that are faster and way more cost efficient. Security, interoperability, and also it's very developer friendly. So it's very, very easy to get in touch with the GMX. With the Arbitrum team. They've been very, very helpful, and so I think that really makes them stick out amongst the competitors. And so we're really impressed with the Arbitrum ecosystem. I think we have far more TVL to build on the chain.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at layer two solutions throughout most of what was it, 2021, and kind of got the feeling that that was where the future was going to be pretty quickly. So we started looking at where we were going to deploy seriously probably about 9 months ago now. I actually went to the Arbitrum booth at ETH Denver and got Steven's card, and he said, "Give me a message if you're going to think about deploying here." So good, good from him. But I think at that time, GMX was becoming a bit of a liquidity source for derivatives on Arbitrum. And we had Premier and Dopex getting some attention as well in the option space. So it seemed like there was going to be a bit of a snowball happening. And obviously, we need as many options as we can get for hedging. So combined with that, the low gas fees on Arbitrum, I think it's particularly important because of the complex nature of derivatives. They can be quite computationally intensive and therefore not suitable for mainnet. It made sense that Arbitrum would be, our home, and I think that's been proven right in the last 9 months since we made that decision. We've got RageTrade now coming through. We've got Umami and Uniswap, and we've got all these different protocols that hopefully in the near future will give us more and more options to play around with.
Yeah, it's no secret that Arbitrum has consistently had a white glove approach with its partnerships. And what we mean by that is our partnerships team and our dev relations team and our community team have always been very heavily involved and, doing more than like what is asked of them within most projects. And, we can't take all the credit. We built the foundation for the ecosystem, and then we had just incredible and motivated builders and community members who came and lit the spark. And kind of once the ball got going, and mainnet went live last year, it didn't seem to slow down. So it's really great to have just a stage of really passionate and successful builders, and more to come in the future. It's pretty exciting. So, with all of you being, your own respective protocols, I'd like to hear from each of you kind of what are your maybe personal or within your team, like what are the biggest challenges in DeFi that you've faced? Why don't we start with you, Viper?
Yeah, so I think this kind of goes for all of DeFi. I think security is definitely up there. I think no matter how many audits you have, no matter how much insurance you make available, there's always risks in DeFi, and we do our best at RageTrade to mitigate those risks as much as possible. However, those risks are always there, and we like to make it very, very clear. And so, we have done an approach where not only are we scaling our TVL, because we have about a little over $44 million in LP commitments so far, and that's just private LP commitments, not even considering the community. And so, of course, post first audit, we can just put no cap, but we want to be as responsible as possible and security minded as possible. We really like to put ourselves in the shoes of investors. And so what we've done is we've done a $10 million cap that, of course, was filled in quite literally seconds, as expected when you have that much demand. But to be as responsible as possible and to lead by example, we want to scale our TVL with our audits. So first audit completed, 10 million in. This month, Y Academy will finish our second audit. Once that's completed, another $10 million cap increase. Not until we have at least 3 audits under our belts do we feel comfortable removing the cap on the TVL. Additionally, we've also purchased, completely paid for by the RageTrade team, the maximum policy through Sherlock. So we also have that as well. So when we did launch, not only did we do a $10 million soft cap, but we also purchased insurance to make depositors feel as comfortable as possible. But like I said, the biggest challenge of DeFi is security, and there's always risks, and you cannot completely eliminate those risks. And so I think, especially for scaling projects like ourselves, that's always something that we have to be very, very cautious about and innovative about. Whether that's and it's very hard to get unlimited insurance. Sherlock, we were fortunate enough to have a deal with Sherlock, but people like Nexus Mutual and other insurance providers, a lot of them won't give you insurance, or they won't let you buy insurance until, well, first of all, until you're live, until you've been live for a few months, until you've had X amount of audits, etc. And so even after doing all that, there's still a very, very strict cap and limitation. And so I think with DeFi, that's always going to be a challenge until insurance is more normalized and more frequently available.
Yeah, and also just even in the Web2 space, or not even Web2, just in real world insurance providers, I'm sure we've all had, or hopefully not had, to make a claim at some point, and they don't make it easy. It's something every protocol and company and personal usage is required, but it's not meant to be like, we want you to make a claim. It's like, it's a last resort, and like a safe file. So I can see how that's always going to be a difficult thing to deal with, especially in early space like DeFi.
Yeah, we've had quite a similar sort of ideology going into our products as well. We've been incredibly clear about the fact that in our current state, Risk Alpha, we're all about testing the infrastructure, and we've set quite a low cap on our product as well. And yeah, we're huge fans of Sherlock too, and the insurance that they provide. So yeah, security is incredibly important, and I think as well, with the complexity that comes with integrations as well, it becomes increasingly difficult and expensive to get high quality auditors that have the domain knowledge, not only of the product you're building, but also the products that you're integrating with, because you can't really satisfactorily audit one product without understanding the thing that it hooks into. And for us as well, I think moving on from security for us, one of our biggest challenges is that DeFi is still incredibly immature, I think, and it doesn't have the same variety of tools that a professional fund manager might have access to in TradFi. I think until quite recently, DeFi has been just a tool to maximize kind of exposure and speculation, and it's only really been in the last 6 to 12 months, maybe, possibly as a result of this incredibly drawn out bear market, that hedging has really started to be talked about seriously, and we've got this like delta neutral narrative being made, which I love to see. So for Rysk in particular, one of the biggest problems we face is access to a diverse range of hedging tools, and in particular for Greeks other than Delta. So talking about Gamma, Vega, Theta, and also contracts that have expiration dates, such as expirable futures and stuff. So we've got our eyes on a few things coming through, but obviously, it's kind of a cat and mouse game of liquidity. It's incredibly important to have liquidity in these products, for us to be able to hedge our positions effectively, without getting wrecked with too much slippage.
What about you, CoinFlip? From GMX side, you guys are one of the OGs. You probably face some hills.
It's a lot of what everybody has said. So, I mean, security and safety is absolutely. I mean, as a protocol, if that's not what you're spending the bulk of your time on, I think you're kind of doing a bit of a disservice. And a lot of it's not something that most of the community or others will really get a full sense of. Obviously, in some sense, I think insurance has been it's been slow, but we've been working a lot with insurance providers more than anything else, because the more and more people who are putting their eyes to the protocol, to the contract to get comfortable, the better. To a certain extent, even the number of people who've been building on top of us. And I think having really great teams that are really looking at understanding the risks that come with building off of somebody else's code. Like, I'll just use an example. Like, we're very reluctant to build over top of others, for that same reason, because it does require a lot of time to make sure that you have that understanding. We found it helpful, at least for us, to get that feedback. And I think the other one is that, and maybe this is a unique problem, which is that, we've obviously, GMX has scaled very nicely, more so than maybe we had anticipated. And it's also about then making sure that you've created systems that hopefully can address, those changing environments. And, today you can almost make a case that GMX maybe has even more liquidity that then can be effectively deployed within its systems. But that doesn't mean that we don't keep working to keep finding, better and better solutions. We've got new contracts that are coming out. Again, hopefully something that we'll work with all of our partners to be able to, provide these liquid markets to them. So it's, I guess, problems change over time, but I think safety and security is the one that's just universal. I mean, it always is. And I think the bigger you grow, like it's great having open lines to teams like Arbitrum, the Bridges, everybody else, and an even expanded ecosystem, because there's many players who come into play, for trying to create a safe environment, even if something were to ever go wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I find I mean, like on the point about insurance, I think like I don't know how much. I think it still needs a bit of a shake up, because as it stands, insurance is still technically it's a form of under collateralized loan. If you think about it, like if you use Sherlock as an example, just because I'm very good friends with Sherlock team, I love what they're doing. But if you look at their example, for example, if you look at what they're doing, if you look at the size of their staking pool relative to the amount of coverage they have, an absolute disaster event could be catastrophic to stakers and insurers. And I think that the insurance field probably isn't as mature as it needs to be necessarily to be ready for covering these things. And then combine that with the fact that the vast majority of say vast majority, but a lot of DeFi users, at least that I've met, are exceptionally degenerate. And so they tend to just put money into things without sort of any forethought or stuff like that. So I think there is a growing use case for insurance, but I'm just concerned a bit about currently how it's implemented and sort of how black swans actually truly impact these protocols, especially in terms of like insurance payout.
Well, and you're right. And in the context of the market, they're currently a pretty limited offering, and one that, if I were to use an example, if you look at traditional insurance markets, I mean, you have insurers, you have reinsurers, you have tranching of risk, you have a lot of things that are developed, no different than every other part of the financial market. And there's probably a lot more time that needs to be spent. And if I had to sympathize, the one thing I would say is that, given how quickly things are also turning over within the space, I mean, if you take all of the time that you should take to properly understand a protocol, try to understand what you think the risks are, try to price that risk, and those entire protocols are turning over and changing in 6 or 12 months, you don't get a lot of time to be active in the market and understanding the risk that you're insuring. It's not like,
Absolutely.
a car,
Yeah.
a house, products that, typically as they enter, they're getting a very long lifespan. Even if you take things like,
I mean, the risk to know, right?
Like credit default swaps, they're at least on assets that they know they're going to get, somebody builds a market around it. They're going to get paid for a number of years potentially on that product. So just as an example, I think it's something that it'll take time, but I mean, it'll be great to see if large liquidity pools from the community can start to build up to provide those sort of pools and hopefully those returns. But let's see.
Yeah, I just think like speaking on Sherlock specifically, like the yield problem was one that they had a big problem with. Like, for example, they were deploying in Maple because they felt that they needed a large amount of yield to attract like actual stakers in insurance. So I think a big factor is going to be figuring out how to incentivize people to provide to these insurance pools, basically, which, maybe something we can all solve by using options or whatever to account for black swan events within the ecosystem. But we'll see.
Yeah, well, it's tough because I think we're no stranger to the idea that as the space evolves and for it to continue to evolve in a forward fashion, not only do the security infrastructure, the scaling, and the developers need to get smarter and more responsible, the users themselves, the communities, we have to, us as users, throwing our money and our time and our education into things, and how we spread word of mouth, how we onboard our friends and our own private communities into protocols and into communities. We need to there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of just common sense and beyond common sense. Like, effort just has to be put in if you're going to be using things that have such high risk. And it's just in an early space that we all understand has a lot of room to grow, which is it's a good thing and a scary thing all at the same time, right? So that's always my view on it. In the back of my head is that education and security are kind of synonymous at times.
Yeah, completely agree. I think our approach at Risk has always been about sort of how we can improve the general understanding of risk awareness and risk management, which is something we're going to be focusing a lot more going forward. But I think it's such an important and missed part of things. But it is starting to grow as people are becoming more aware of hedged stuff and also like the whole delta neutral narrative. So yeah, I'm excited to see where we go from here and make sure it happens.
Yeah, and one of the unpopular opinions I find when I'm I guess onboarding people in spaces I do community development in for Web3 is you have to sacrifice convenience for security and for a longer lasting experience, which in my opinion makes for a better user experience. So that's like my big I guess not red flag, but disclaimer when I'm trying to teach people about the ecosystem and how many great tools there are to use, but enter it slowly and understand what you're using and join the communities and trust but verify, all these kind of things, which I think should be popular opinions. But what are some unpopular opinions, I guess, you guys either have or hear sometimes in the community that is sometimes, for the better in the long run?
I can kick us off. I personally, also an unpopular opinion I have, I guess I could make it about integration, is I don't really think we're going to see huge adoption until we've standardized our smart contract interfaces for even for derivatives. So, for example, like standardizing how contracts might interact with each other, or users might interact with each other with smart contracts for even things like creating a perp position, creating an options position, and so on. I think that's kind of a big thing that is. It definitely makes smart contract integration easier if every perp protocol followed the same external interface, and every options protocol followed the same external interface. But I think just because everything's still a bit PvP amongst certain protocols, it just means that takes a bit longer to figure out what a standard way of doing that is. And I don't think in the case of options that's necessarily going to take a winner takes all kind of vibe like Uniswap has. But we'll see. I think the standardization is something that's going to become very, very important for, and already is important for smart contract design, especially amongst complex derivative protocols. Yeah.
I guess I'll add to that. I look at it in terms of regulation because I have a legal background. A lot of people are against regulation, but I highly encourage it, at least in DeFi, to an extent, obviously. But I think it's very hard to be compliant when there's uncertainty, and so I think there needs to be a perfect medium. I'm a big fan of decentralization, obviously, but I think when people are trying to innovate in the DeFi space, especially people who live in the US, um, you know, you're kind of shooting in the dark sometimes. I mean, most people are not going to hire counsel as they're building their product. And so, you're always constantly wondering, am I security? Am I this? And so I think it kind of stifles innovation a little bit just because there's so much uncertainty. And so I think a little bit of regulation needs to be introduced. And then also, I would add, I think we are not as tested on market downturns as we think. I know there's been quite a few market dumps and price manipulation that's happened, but I think that because liquidity is so scarce in DeFi, I think we're so early that there's not enough liquidity for us to be kind of comfortable with new concepts. And so that's why you see a lot of price manipulation, because if you have a big enough bag, you're able to move markets and manipulate things in certain ways, like we've seen in the past few weeks or in the past few months. And so I think we're very, very far from being a mature market, which I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. But yeah, I would definitely say the regulation part, there needs to be a little bit to kind of guide builders and guide us to kind of see what we need to do.
I think on your point on council and products not building with council, I think a lot. I don't know if this is the same for you, but for us at least, we find that just council just doesn't know. There's sort of it's just such a gray area that even council doesn't really know the answer. So it sort of essentially starts to become useless, basically. But yeah, interested to hear your thought on that with a legal background.
No, I totally agree. I before I went full time crypto, I was an attorney, and I remember, because I learned about crypto formally in a crypto law and blockchain policy course in law school, I was kind of introduced to crypto more formally with tech involved as well, and DAOs and stuff like that. And so when I wanted to transition into the legal field of crypto, it was incredibly hard because everyone expects you to have 8+ years experience, but those with 8+ years experience don't know what crypto is. And so obviously there's a big curve and big learning curve and stuff. But I think until they realize that, it's going to be incredibly hard to get counsel. And I think projects need to start consulting counsel and things like that ahead of time before they've messed up, right? I think we see too often in the market that counsel's only used when they're screwed, and so I think that obviously puts people like investors in a horrible spot. And so I think people need to be more responsible in that aspect. And I know, for example, Rage has their own counsel, and so they've already gone through everything before launching. So that's one way to lead by example. But of course, like you said, it's very hard to find, first off, counsel that'll take you as a client, because they're very pessimistic about crypto in general. But then also, of course, there's other obstacles like funding and being able to afford these kind of things. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were very lucky at Risk to find good legal counsel, but I know, like, from projects in the past, that it's it can be a bit of a nightmare, especially as like investors ask, "Oh, how does the regulatory side look like?" And I'm like, I don't have the money to pay them because they're so expensive right now. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I'll jump on that sort of issue of regulation. I kind of have a viewpoint that any DeFi project you can be as experimental as you like, and I think the deregulated aspect of it is fair game. But I think what really sort of bugs me is the way these products are presented. So I'll use the big one as an example with the whole Terra collapse. I don't necessarily think that experimenting with algorithmic stablecoins is inherently bad, but I do think the way that Do Kwon went about advertising it as effectively a risk-free savings account was downright illegal, or it should be. And that's, I think, part of the big reason why so many small protocols and startups got so wrecked is because they just assumed 20% yield was free. And to go back to stuff that's a little bit closer to what we do, there's options vaults that say they'll have a certain APY return that comes with huge assumptions that the options that they're selling don't expire in the money, which of course they do, maybe one in every 10 weeks. And so you end up with these kind of predicted APYs that say 10 to 15%, but in actual fact the vault is down 60%. So yeah, for me, I think the regulatory clarity needs to come in being very honest and upfront about what the risks are for the products that we're building, and it's something that we're really trying to do at Rysk. Hence the name. We're all about risk metrics and trying to help people understand the risks that they're taking on.
Yeah, and this will probably be a very unpopular opinion for a lot of like DeFi maxis, but it's a reality we live in, that the capitalist society that most like Western culture faces is centralized systems. And so to be able to let these decentralized systems evolve, you kind of do have to work with the centralized bodies, not decentralized bodies. You can't just ignore them and just be a revolutionist that way. It always requires working with the regulatory bodies to find a happy medium and to keep whittling away at the opposite direction to find the middle ground. One narrative I know in Europe that's interesting to follow for people who are interested in the legislation regulation side is MiCA, MICA. It's the EU markets in crypto assets, and just like a big regulatory movement that's been going on for a while around trying to find a way basically to stabilize the digital currency market in Europe. It's pretty interesting what's going on there, in my opinion. Not sure what the equivalent would be in North America, even though I live here. But yeah, so it's a good thing to keep an eye on. As we talk about like the future and the certainties and uncertainties in 2023, I'm curious about the things we can control, which is where everyone's taking their protocols and the visions you have for the next couple quarters. If you guys are able to at least speak on some of the public facing information on where you guys want to take your projects in the next half a year to a year? What people can look forward to?
I guess I'll start. Can't say much on our future plans, but I will say that we've been working really, really closely with the GMX team to be one of the first projects to launch or products to launch on GMX's new synthetics. And so we're really, really excited for that. And we have really, really creative ways to introduce new vaults around that product. And so um, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, for Rysk, we're actually launching Rysk Beyond, which is our which I described as our sort of the first hybrid OTC and AMM options protocol, and that will be that goes to audit around mid-January, so yeah, we should be launching that sort of towards the end of Q1. So very excited for that. That's sort of the manifestation of our learnings from Rysk Alpha as well as our sort of quant rigor. Then sort of after that, we're going to be focusing on sort of products that we can build on top of this, Rysk Beyond, because we've designed it very deliberately to be quite flexible and allow basically anyone to construct any kind of options product they want. So within one transaction, you can build like a butterfly, an iron condor, any kind of option strategy you'd like. And so we want to really harness that using products we have, that using sort of other alternative products. And yeah, that should help sort of this whole narrative of using, liquidity, keeping liquidity internal to DeFi, which we follow quite a lot of risk. And then aside from that, we're also working on another product, which I won't talk about right now, but we do think there's a clear lack of it in the market, and we're very excited to release that sort of towards Q2, Q3, and that should, we believe, unlock a lot of sophisticated on-chain activity. So yeah, there's a bit about Rysk.
In terms of GMX, our focus right now is getting GMX synthetic markets up. Our goal is to is obviously both for individuals who are both trading, hedging, but also a lot of the protocols we're working with to just try to create big liquid markets on chain for them to be able to both take on and offload risk in a capital efficient manner. So we feel that GMX and what we did with GLP has been a great starting point, and we think that we can do the same thing and be able to further scale up the amount of liquidity and market size that we can address, both for, let's call it, the big markets like ETH and BTC, plus additional slightly less liquid assets. Still, let's say top 10, top 20 tokens within crypto, and potentially some assets beyond the crypto sphere. But again, done sort of systematically over time. Assets where there's good, strong liquidity and there's a need for an on-chain market.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I know the viewers are probably always thirsty for a little bit of alpha, and we have a bunch of people on stage who probably can give a little. That could even be in the form of some tips on how to, easily use your protocols. In my opinion, a good way is to learn how to use them safely, and then you'll be able to use them more successfully. So kind of, tips or alpha do you guys feel like throwing out there to the community?
I guess I'll mention that we have some solid partnerships already formed, for example, with Abracadabra and UXD protocol. And so very, very soon, you'll be able to do some sort of loop leveraging, kind of like DGen box style, where you'll be able to provide your yield generating LP tokens and borrow stables against them and do some sort of loop leveraging, or just free up some stables to use elsewhere. And so we've really focused on adding leverage options for those based on their risk appetite. And so that's one of many ways we have planned to enhance our yield even further, as well as partnerships with people like Revest, kind of like AP Wine style, where you can sell your yield or buy yield up front. And so that's definitely a great way to enhance your yield and also get some exposure, not only on the Arbitrum ecosystem, but on the Rage ecosystem.
Loop leveraging makes me think of just like Inception leverage.
I can give a, so yeah, I guess let's think about how to get alpha. So I have so generally, if we want to talk about financial alpha, I guess volatility is very low right now. So if you don't, I'd recommend buying options if you haven't. But obviously, I don't know. I probably that probably is financial advice. So I don't do it if you don't not comfortable with it. But yeah, that's what I'm doing right now, buying as much vol as I can. Then also, in terms of using Rysk, in the future you'll be able to basically construct any strategy you want, and that means that you'll be able to construct various sort of option strategies which will help manage the risk of your portfolio. So these could be the form of spreads, collars, even strangles, which will basically allow you to access certain risk management that isn't really currently possible in DeFi without some difficulty. And so, yeah, stay tuned for that, and obviously just join the Discord and ask questions about Rysk Beyond, so we can help out with that, with your endeavors there, and making your portfolios more risk friendly.
Thank you, Jib. CoinFlip, got any alpha for the blueberries out there?
I mean, it's kind of all out there. Synths are on the way. We're working on that. We will have some interesting. I think we'll have some interesting partnership announcements in the coming weeks that will probably get people really excited for what we're doing with Synths. And hopefully we'll also, really help to showcase, our continued direction to creating more and more permissionless markets. I'll say that, we started from a position of saying that it's, we're a work in progress and we're continuing in that direction. I think people will be quite excited about the direction.
Yes, I can confirm that alpha. I have some alpha for the community as well. Just remember that whenever you're, finding a new protocol, finding something in DeFi, something you see online on Reddit or Twitter, or someone tells you about, you never have to FOMO. There's always, every day, every week, there's time. The market cycles. There's never a rush. That's one thing you should always take your time in the market. Don't ever think you have to put all your eggs in one basket and just move very fast. And then another thing that people sometimes forget is when you're trying a new protocol, you can test it with a couple dollars. You don't have to just use your actual portfolio immediately and wait, practice it, treat it like it's a new instrument. Learn how to use it, and then when you learn how to use it slowly and with a little bit of money, then you'll feel more comfortable being more risk averse. So yeah, that's none of it's financial advice, but it is safety tips to stay in this space longer and not have people I guess feel like this space is always about highs and lows. There's a middle ground always.
To add to the safety tips, I would always recommend making sure that the team that you're putting money into actually cares about security. That's one of the biggest red flags to me. Is I always, whenever I enter a protocol, as I look at what they've done for security and whether they actually care. There is a protocol recently that I don't think I'll name, but they got a lot of liquidity very quickly, and they didn't seem to care about their security that much, and they got exploited. And so, had you just done the proper due diligence on how do they care about security, you would have avoided losing a lot of money in that situation. So that's always a big one, is just try and understand how much the team actually cares about security. And a good place to start is just looking if they do have an audit. And if they do have an audit, look at, try and understand whether that's a good quality audit or not. So yeah, that's my general advice for safety tips as well.
Yeah, and to elaborate on that, if you're ever uncertain or you just can't find the information, but you still want to try something, it's really easy and free to make separate crypto wallets from your ones that hold your primary, assets. So just keep that in mind. You can always use a burner wallet to try the more experimental things if that's your cup of tea. All right.
I was going to just add in that I think the don't FOMO endpoint is absolutely valid. I mean, I think that there's nothing wrong with putting a little bit in, getting yourself comfortable. If it turns out it works the way you intended, you see that the contributors, the community are active. There is some substance there. Continuing to scale yourself in. If it's going well, I don't think you're going to be bothered a little bit higher, a little bit lower. And quite often the time to be buying is when others are not. And so today I think you can look around the market and find many interesting protocols and projects that are still building, that are still active, that are still communicating with the community, and they have products that are out and maybe more products that are coming. And I think it's a peaceful time to be identifying those opportunities right now.
Yeah, I think if we make friends with bear markets, we learn a lot and we end up enjoying this space a lot more in the long run. I think if you talk to anyone who's been through more than one or two cycles, they would confirm that for you if you're uncertain to take our word for it. And yeah, always trust your instincts. Trust but verify, we always say in this space. And if unless anyone has any final words, I think we can wrap up this space.
Thanks for putting this together, man. It's fun.
Yeah, thanks for everyone showing up.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks everyone for attending. It was a great time.
All right, everyone, enjoy your holiday recoveries. I'm sure we all need it. Yeah. We need to hydrate.
See you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, guys, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, Arbonauts.